Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Johnny Valentine and we're here to go through our Let's Learn Together Part 3 for SCCM, and today we'll be running through the installation of SCCM. So in the last episode we went through the prerequisites for the platform, which is things that you need to do for any platform, extending AD, setting up SQL, etc. In this episode we'll go through the installation, but there are some server specific prerequisites. So there's a link up there that you can go to, details down which one that you need for each type of server role, but generally speaking you're going to need to put on .NET, latest ADK, latest MDT. If you're going to deploy operating systems, better to use the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit to extend SCCM out, etc. Distribution points no longer use bits. So if you go to that link, it will show you what you need for each type of server role that you're going to be deploying. Generally speaking, in these sessions will be deploying one central site server, and then I'll spin off a couple of roles to a separate server to show you how that's done. So we'll be installing all of the bits and pieces during this video. In terms of the Windows Automated Deployment Kit, you can only now download that from MSDN. There's a link on the screen. Do make sure you download the correct version, so we'll be downloading the one for the latest version of Windows and installing that. In terms of IIS, just be aware that you can't just install IIS. There are different roles that you need. If you install those bits, those are all the roles that you need for a single centralized server. So again, be running through that, installing IIS before we install SCCM onto the server itself. And whilst we set up SQL, what we didn't do is we didn't open up any of the firewall ports for it. And during installation of Configuration Manager, the remote registry service needs to be enabled. But what we'll do is we'll go through the installation first of all and not enable any of those ports to show you what happens. So let's go on with the demo. So here we are in the lab. Let's first of all start to install IIS, .NET Framework, etc., and all those roles and features that we need. So if we go through the usual Server Manager Add Roles and Features screen, we can say that we want to add in IIS. I don't believe we need any of the other roles at the moment. Windows Deployment Services we will need later on. Has to be installed before we install the software update point, but to do a base central site server we don't actually need to do that, so we'll leave that uninstalled for now. Generally speaking, the deployment services is needed if you're doing Pixel multicast posts on the distribution point. So we'll leave that unticked for now, just to show you how installing that in a later video. But for now we need the .NET Framework 3.5, so we'll add those features in. We don't need non-HTTP activation. We need .NET Framework 4.5.2, which, as we're on 2016, that's been replaced by 4.6. HTTP activation as well. There you go. Don't believe we need the others. In terms of the IIS configuration, if we move on to the next screens, we should find that there. So we want the default document. We need static content, which is enabled. Under the application development section, we need 3.5 and 4.6 for the extensibility. ASP.NET 3.5 and 4.6 as well. We need the ISAPI extensions, which are already selected, and we need the II6 Metabase compatibility and the WMI compatibility. So if we select all of those off, we should be good to go. So I'll just pause the video here while those download. And that's IIS and the .NET framework installed. One thing we did forget to install, one thing I forgot to install, was the remote differential compression. So let's just go back and put that on. There you go, down the bottom there. So we need that installed. The other thing is WSUS services. We didn't install WSUS. Could put WSUS on another server, but if we want to control it and integrate it with SCCM, then we need the console to be installed. And we'll use the same SQL server. Oh, sorry, take off the WID. Put in SQL server, use our SQL server for WSUS as well. So we need to create a path to hold the WSUS downloads. Create a new folder. So if we put in our SQL server name there, which should be SCCM-SQL-01. Go and check our connection. I've got the name of the server. I've called it SQL SCCM-01 because it's primarily a SQL server. Go and check the connection, and we should find that it fails because we haven't got the firewall ports open. So no connection. So if we just pause there, I'll connect to the SQL server and open up the firewall ports that we need. So here we are on our SQL server. So if I open up the firewall, Windows app with advanced firewall, then we need to create a couple of inbound rules. One inbound rule will be for SQL itself, so that'll be port 1433. Allow that connection, and that'll be just standard SQL. And another new rule, and we'll open that up for port 4022, and that should be for our SQL browser service. So we'll start that up as well, and while we're here we'll just check the services. So we will need to set up the remote registry service, which whilst it's set to automatic isn't running. And we'll also need the SQL Server browser service to be running. So that should be SQL configured. So now back to our SCCM server. And here we are back on the SCCM server. So if I click on check connection, then we successfully connect to the SQL server straight away. So if we now confirm that, we can start installing those couple of additional features, and I'll come back to you when this is finished. And so there we go, there's those roles installed. Next, what we need to do is we need to install the ADK, so download that and install that. When it's downloaded and installed, what we need to do is we need to select these three items from the setup screen to have that installed. So let's go back to the lab and get that installed. So here we are on the download page for Windows ADK. As I said, this is now housed on MSDN. So scroll down, select get the Windows ADK for the latest version of Windows. You need the right ADK for the Windows that you'll be running. So if you're only going to be doing Windows 8 or Windows 7 devices, then perhaps download the previous one if that's what you want to do. But definitely for Windows 10 you need to get the right version of the ADK. So we'll just start that downloading now. Whilst you can redirect the ADK to install somewhere else, just be aware that that will almost certainly break the ADK's integration with SCCM. So what we do is we install it to the default location. If you like, if you're setting up a lot of servers, you can download it first and then install it from your downloaded centralized location. So we'll just say no, don't want to send through any anonymous data to Microsoft, mainly because this is a lab and I don't want to skew their results for what they're getting from just my lab environment. In a live environment you may want to help them out so that will make things a bit better for everyone. Scroll down, accept the terms and conditions, and then the items that we want to install are the deployment tools, the Windows PE. Don't need to particularly do the imaging and configuration design do the use state migration tool, don't need the performance toolkit, don't need Windows SQL Server, the UEV or the AppV sequencer. If we want to do AppV, we can download them separately. So all that we should need to do are those three. Interesting choice with the imaging configuration designer. If we weren't using SCCM, then that makes a fine choice for pushing our operating systems. So let's install those three items. As you can see, it's quite a large download. So I'll be back with you when that's finished. And there you go, that's the ADK installed for us. So all that we need to do now is get on and install SCCM itself. So I have the CD mounted. If we just run the splash screen, see we're installing version 16.06. It no longer says 2012, and we can just move on with the install. So before you run this wizard, verify that you've got supported SQL Server installation with the correct collation, etc. Identify the fully qualified domain name of the computer that is running SQL. In my case, as I said, that's SQL-SCCM-01. Confirm that computers for configuration manager site systems meet the minimum system requirements, which I believe I've done. Certainly good enough for a lab anyway. And read the online notes just in case there's anything happened after the time that this video has been made. So our choices are, we can install the primary site or we can install and configure a central site. If we install the central site, we have to create primary sites underneath it. So we're going to create a primary site. You can also use the wizard to upgrade versions or to recover a site from a backup. So we're just going to install a primary site. Now we won't use the typical installation options, and we won't use those mainly because of this: configure local SQL Server with default settings. So we want to use a remote SQL Server, so we're going to go through a manual setup. We'll install the evaluation edition of the product. Notice that if we do put a license key in, this takes you back to the current branch and long-term servicing branch. If you're on the long-term servicing branch, you can put a date in for when your software assurance expires, and if you do that, you won't be able to update until you just change that date again. So we're going to go for the evaluation version, and again, if we were to put license key in, you can see whether you're on the current branch or the long-term servicing branch. You can force yourself onto the long-term servicing branch if you know you are never ever going to update. So we'll take the current branch, we'll install the evaluation edition, and then we can look later at how to enter the license key to fully license SCCM. So next, have to read and accept the license terms. So I know that in your work environments you'll fully read those and have those signed off. Download required files. Well, we downloaded those in the previous video. So if I just put in a /prerequisites, so I can't browse to them, then it should find the files that we downloaded. Once it's verified our prerequisites, then we can choose which language we want for the configuration manager console and reports. So we'll only be reporting English, so we'll just accept the English. And then if we're running a multinational business, then you can choose which languages to use for the client to support your users, so what language the users can use within the actual SCCM client. So we'll keep it nice and simple. We'll do that just as English as well. Next we get onto the site code. Very important, 3-character site code that you enter, but there are some codes that you can't use. As you can see, the codes that you can't use are actually reserved for use by SCCM and Windows. So if you use these, things might break. So if you just avoid using those 5 codes, then everything will be fine. So I'm just going to enter the code DC1. That will allow us to have up to, say, 9 or 10 sites. I could have used DCA, DCB, DCC, so for data center, allowing up to 26 sites, or any other combination of codes that you like. So this will be my central data center site, and my installation folder must be unique and can be changed. And we want to install the configuration manager console. Going to join this to not going to join this to a central site because one doesn't exist. This will be our primary site. So we'll install the primary site as a standalone site. And as you can see, we're going to install this as a standalone site. The message that used to come up, it used to say you won't be able to join it, but now you can see that you can actually join it to a central site if you need to. Our SQL Server name then that we'll be joining to is SQL SCCM-01. It will create a database name for us, so configuration manager underscore and then our site code. So you can call the database whatever you like, or you can just accept the default name, and it's going to try and connect to the service broker on port 4022. So let's connect across. And the wizard auto detects where the databases should be set up. Interesting thing is you can either pre-create the database or not pre-create the database. If you don't pre-create the database, then the setup wizard will try and write to the $share on the SQL Server to create the files. So do make sure that you have that level of file sharing enabled on your SQL Server if you just want to push the SQL databases onto it. Specify where the SMS provider will be installed, so you can now have multiple SMS providers, which is basically the way that we can connect to the database outside of the central site server. So if you have multiple SMS providers, you can always get into, have a functioning solution, even if the system central site server fails or the primary server fails. So we'll install the SMS provider straight on this server. I haven't got PKI set up at the moment in the lab, so default is to install securely. What we'll do though is we'll just configure the communication method on each site server role, and we'll remediate it later when we deploy HTTPS. We'll take this opportunity to install the management point and distribution point. We'll probably uninstall the distribution point later and move it to a specialist server. But just to get SCCM installed, we'll install it with HTTP and put those 2 roles on this server. Do you want Microsoft to collect data about you? So keep Configuration Manager up to date by connecting to the Configuration Manager cloud service, which allows us to download and install new features. If you want to do this later, you'd have to install the service connection point site system role. So we'll just leave it. This then is what's going to be configured. So primary site code DC1, we'll call it the central data center. Client configured to communicate both over HTTP and HTTPS. We're running the evaluation, as I said. I'll show you at the end of the video how to install a proper license key there. We're going to install it just straight onto our C drive. You might want to move that later on or put it somewhere else when you're deploying into production. separate SQL server with that database name, protocol for distribution points, protocol for management points, service connection point to download updates. So what then happened is the prerequisite checker will run. This is run every time you do something on the sites to make sure that the server's in a fit state. What we'll probably notice is that we might get the odd warning. One that I'm expecting to come up is with an error earlier in this video where I said that bits is no longer enabled, because the documentation says that bits is no longer enabled, but it turns out that it is. So I'll show you that error appearing. We'll remediate that and then rerun the prerequisite checker. As you can see, bits is neither installed nor enabled, so we can quickly go in and add that in once again. So it's a server feature. So we'll add bits back in with its IIS extension. Now that bits is installed, we can rerun the prerequisite checks and we should get a full clean bill of health and be able to install SCCM. To do that, we just click on begin install, because as you can see, all prerequisite rules passed successfully, so we can now install SCCM. So I'll pause the video here and come back to you when the install has completed. And here we are after nearly an hour and the installation is finished. So we now have SCCM installed. So I'll be back with you straight after we've rebooted. So now the server's rebooted, we can go into the Configuration Manager console, and once it's started you'll be able to see that we are on an evaluation version. So I did say I'd show you how to reset the license key for that. So if you shut down the console and go into Control Panel, Programs and Features, then notice that we have the primary site. We click on uninstall/change, and change is the important thing. We can therefore perform site maintenance on this site, and what that allows us to do is we can click on update the evaluation edition to a licensed edition, type in our license key, we accept all of the license terms, and that should now license the software for us. So if we go back into System Center, into the console, we should find that the message is now gone. Well, thanks for watching this video. In the next few videos, we'll be looking at how to perform post-configuration tasks, post-installation tasks to get SCCM more fully up and running. I've been Johnny Valentine. Hope to see you soon. Bye.